and welcome to the Daily Devo Live. I am your host with the most, or as they would say at one of my favorite rides at Walt Disney World, I am your ghost host. You guys remember that ride? The Haunted Mansion? So yeah, welcome to the Daily Devo Live. It is great to be with you all once again. And I am working on my light here to see if I can get myself a little brighter. There we go. So I don't look so orange. But yeah, it's good to be here. Good to see y'all. And let me see. I need to get myself together here. Hold on. Here we go. I fixed my title as well. My title page is better. It actually has the right date on it, which is good. So that's awesome. Yes. So I've discovered that I'm also broadcasting live on YouTube. Apparently that has been fixed. I wasn't doing that before, but YouTube is happening. Twitter is happening. And of course, Facebook is happening. So it's great to be all broadcasting on those. I'm going to work on trying to figure out how to get on some other platforms as well, just for the fun of it. I think we need to make sure that we're going to start doing this with the church as well. I think we're going to start broadcasting on multiple platforms with our worship service, but I've got to get my tech team to the net. I got to get them through the next thing, right? we add something and then they need to adjust and they need to get, coordinated, and then we'll add something else. I mean, we just got to keep pushing though, because everything keeps changing so quickly. Good morning, everybody. So we've got folks on from all over the place already. So that's awesome. And we generally just sort of, folks will straggle along, coming here. So there we go. We're gonna, let's see, sharing a group. I don't think I want to do that. So I'm going to share to a page. I'm going to share this to our church page. Sometimes what happens is people are not paying attention, or they haven't followed me. But they follow. So we can sometimes share to them, and then they'll pick it up then, and they will find their way to us. So that's kind of how that works. But yeah, sharing a group. We're not going to do a watch party, but I will share this in one of our groups. There we go. All right, cool. Welcome. It's been a crazy week already. I tell you what, man, there's been so many things going on. It is absolutely nuts. I came back from vacation and immediately just everything went woof. It's like one of those things where I wasn't quite expecting like all of the things to happen, but it's great. I mean, it's all good stuff. It's busy stuff. I think I've had something just about every single night this week. There's been something else. And so that's, for some of y'all, you've been with me on some of those things, right? You've been present during some of our meetings and so forth. But I had a meeting with pastors on Tuesday night. Last night was our class, the first class of 6 that we're going to have. We had an introduction class a couple weeks ago, but this was our first class for this series that we're doing on conversations about racial injustice. I thought Carlin did an amazing job. One of our church members, Carlin Floyd, she's been facilitating the conversations on racial injustice for us and is doing an amazing job of putting things together. And we were able to have some breakout groups last night and to have some conversations. And it was just fantastic. So thank y'all. There were so many of y'all that are on here today. We're there last night. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. We're committed to this as a church. This is something that I believed very strongly when all of this stuff started happening, and all the when George Floyd was murdered, and then all of the subsequent things that have been happening since. I felt like this is something that our church needed to be engaged in, that I needed to be engaged in more than I had been, so it was definitely well worth the effort to get everybody to do this and to come together and to kind of. So I feel like it's one of those things where I'm watching it happen, right? And I'm seeing people step into this and watching people, kind of move forward and lead, and it's just amazing to be able to be a part of that. I'm actually going to be attending a conference today. It's a Zoom conference, but I'm actually going to be attending a conference on racial injustice and sort of like, having the conversation at the church level, so like, what do churches need to be doing? What do churches need to be saying? I feel like that most of the people that are going to be on this call are from the, sort of the kind of other side of the church than ours. And when I say that, I mean, like mostly like non-denominational, Baptist, Pentecostal, that kind of thing. I mean, I think it's a mix of people. And who knows? I mean, there might be some mainline church folks there as well. I don't know. But, I think that what's happening is a lot of these churches that have been silent for a very long time. And honestly, I mean, I've not been that vocal about these issues. I mean, every year, or so, I would preach sermons about, racial injustice. I would talk about Martin Luther King Jr. around the holiday. There's all kinds of things that I've tried to do. But there's, when it comes down to it, when you realize like what I could have been doing and what I was doing, there's a disconnect between the two. And so, those days are over, right? I'm not gonna be silent anymore. And I'm glad that I'm in a context. I'm glad I'm part of a church where, that's also something I think people are feeling as well. I did have somebody, reach out to me and tell me I was being too political. He was a former church member, somebody that had left. And of course, those are the kind of people, once you've left and, you've moved on, then don't freaking comment. I mean, you left, right? You went to some other church, go pay your own church, right? You got questions, whatever, go talk to the new pastor, right? And, I mean, why contact me and then give me a ration of crap saying that I've become too political? I told the guy to go pound sand. It felt kind of good. So, the thing is, I was telling y'all yesterday that one of the things that I heard on this podcast was this black church leader was saying that, she was sitting with a mega church pastor who basically said the reason why I haven't been talking about these things is because I'm afraid of losing donors. I've had a board member who told me that if I bring this up, if I make this an issue, that I'm going to lose my job, that they'll try to get rid of me. So this is in one of those predominantly white mega churches, that, you know what I'm talking about. So at any rate, that's what the guy said. Well, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who told me that the lead pastor of their church said the exact same thing. And his Presbyterian was like, no, we're not getting into this. We're not talking about it. I'm not going to make this an issue because I know, the guy said, I know that there are people who are going to leave the church if we do. I know that there are people who will stop giving. And we are on a razor thin margin and we can't afford to lose anybody. So we're not talking about it. And I'm like, whoa, okay. So here's the thing. If you're a pastor, okay, and there are injustices in the world that need to be righted, there are things that are wrong, and you choose to ignore them because you're afraid of ticking people off or you're afraid of losing people or you're afraid of, then you need to find another job, man. I mean, you just need to find another job. Because honestly, there's no way to preach the scriptures. There's no way to preach from the Bible. There's no way to follow Jesus. There's no way to do all those things without entering into those conversations about things that are not right in the world. That's what Jesus called us to do. Was to point out those moments, right? And to lift up those that are on the margins and to reach out to those who were outcast. I mean, all those kinds of things are all part of what Jesus did. If you're going to do what Jesus did, then you need to be doing that. And if you can't do that because you're afraid of ticking off your people or losing some donor or whatever, I mean, then man, you probably ought to go find another job. Because that's kind of where I'm at right now is I'm like, I cannot be silent. I can't be silent. It's like when the disciples on the road to Emmaus, when they finally see Jesus, right? They realize and they say, were not our hearts burning inside of us when he was speaking? I mean, that's kind of what we need to be thinking about. And so all of us, we have an opportunity now to do things differently. I was reading a really great devotion from Richard Rohr. Richard Rohr is one of my, as you guys know, I love my Richard Rohr. But he has a daily Devo that comes out that's a lot more eloquent than mine. But today, the Devo was written by Brian McLaren. If you guys have never read any Brian McLaren, I'm telling you, Brian McLaren changed my life. He was part of the journey that I had out of all of the sort of legalism and the narrow-mindedness and the kind of stuff that had still hung on for many, many years, even though I went to seminary, even though I went to a very progressive seminary, but I was that angry white conservative guy in seminary that everybody hated, and so I came out of all of that, and then, I had some transformation. So Brian McLaren was a huge part of that. He had a book called Generous Orthodoxy. He had another one called A New Way to Be Christian. There's a ton of books that Brian wrote. Anyway, Brian wrote the Devo for the Center for Contemplation and Action, which is where Richard Rohr, that's where he does his work. And he's basically just sequestered there now. He's not going to be doing any more big events, I don't think. He's battling cancer again, which is sad. I'm glad I got a chance to go see him and to experience him and to meet him, to actually meet him and kind of be in his presence. I mean, he's a fantastic guy. But anyway, the Devo for today was talking about the way that all of the coronavirus crisis and all of the stuff that we've gone through has given us a new lens. It's given us a new way to see. And so, it's almost like we can't go back, right, to the way things were because, there are things that were not right about the way things were, so when whatever comes next, we need to see it through this new lens and to be able to be better and do better, to take care of one another better and to love one another more. And so all of those things were all part of that conversations that I've been having over the past several weeks. So it's super fantastic to be able to see some of this stuff. This is not an easy time by any stretch of the imagination. This is a challenging and difficult moment in history, and it's challenging personally. I mean, I know I've had conversations with many of y'all. I've got my own struggles. I mean, it's not been easy for me. It's not been easy for our family. Things have not always been hunky-dory throughout this entire thing. We've had, problems and issues and challenges and, even now trying to overcome, some of the challenges that are before us. And so we do this, with a lot of humility, right? When I say do this, I mean do this, like leading, talking, speaking, preaching, those kinds of things are done with humility because I'm walking with a limp here, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. And I think y'all know that. I mean, I try to share that as much as I can. I don't tell y'all everything. I gotta have some stuff that, I kind of hold on to. So, you don't know everything, but you know a lot of things. And so you know enough, I think, to realize, that this is kind of, that I'm when I talk about walking with a limp, when I talk about, being a wounded healer, that the Henry Nouwen quote, that I mean when I say, right, because I struggle along with you guys. So this has not been easy. This whole season has not been easy, but we have new lenses, right? We have new possibilities. There are things ahead of us that were not available before, in the way that we can do things differently. And maybe we can begin to foster a kinder, gentler, more peaceable world. And maybe that's what is ahead of us, hopefully. The forces of evil don't go down easy. They do not go down easy. The book of Revelation talks about this, right? The dragon, the great dragon, when it realizes, like when evil realizes that it's beaten, then it begins to thrash. It's death throes, right? It's like, it gets desperate. It's like a wounded animal that's been cornered. It will do anything, right, and destroy anything in order to be free. And so, evil has been defeated ultimately, right, because of the resurrection, because of Jesus Christ. And ground is being taken back. It's slow and it's hard. But the evil doesn't get to win, and it knows it, right? And so it's going to take out as much as it can, right? That's kind of the way that I've always envisioned it, that dragon from Revelation, which was all word pictures and all ways to sort of understand these concepts that we're talking about. So, but yeah, there's a good ending, right? There's a good ending, as I talked about the other day. Okay. So I got a new podcast that's out. I had to re-record it because I lost it somehow. It got deleted from my system. So I have a new podcast that's out. I'm really proud of it. It is the second part of my conversation with Bobby Masingwa, my friend who is a South African, originally from South Africa, and has been a pastor in St. Petersburg for 14 years. Let me tell you something. That is some powerful stuff. If you want to listen to that podcast, I encourage you, I urge you to listen to the podcasts that I've been doing on racial issues and conversations about racial injustice that kind of coincide with what we're doing as a church. I urge you to listen to those. I'm going to probably try to do some more videos of the conversations that I've been having with those guys. Pastor Daryl Horton has agreed to do a podcast with me next week. Pastor Daryl is the guy that you guys saw on the video that we shared early on with Randy Phillips, who's a mega church pastor over here somewhere near us, not too. Randy Phillips used to be part of the band Phillips, Craig, and Dean. That was like a contemporary Christian group way back when. And so Randy's got a big old mega church over there somewhere down 71. And anyway, Randy had Daryl come and meet with him and do a video, like do a conversation. There were some problems with that conversation, and I'm actually thinking I'm gonna send Daryl the questions and see if he'd be willing to answer, because some of the things that they did in that interview I wasn't real thrilled about. But at any rate, I just want to hear from Daryl, honestly. I don't need to hear myself talk, which is usually why when I do the interviews and I do the podcasts, when I redo them and I put them out for publication, I delete all of the parts of me talking. And I just do an introduction. I re-record like an introduction or a segment and stuff in the podcast, because nobody wants to listen to me talk on those, right? They want to hear the people that are being interviewed. And so I've had Sean Welcome, who's an artist and an activist. I've had my friend Bobby, who's a pastor, and who honestly could be considered an activist. I mean, he does a ton of stuff in St. Petersburg, working with the community, working with other pastors, forming some coalitions, working with the police department. So he does a ton of work there. And then Pastor Daryl Horton is the associate pastor and kind of the heir apparent to Mount Zion Baptist Church, Missionary Baptist Church here in Austin, which is the kind of the oldest Black church in Austin. And their pastor, I think, is like 90 years old. He's been there for 50 years. And is still going, still preaching. But one day he will step down and Daryl is going to take over. And Daryl is super involved in the community. And so I'm going to be interviewing him next week. And I'm going to a conference today that Daryl is a part of, and some other folks as well. So I'm hoping to continue these conversations. They've been really illuminating and fantastic. So please check in on the podcast. I'm going to put a link to that podcast in the stuff here. So I'm copying the link. So I'm going to throw it into the Facebook feed. And here we go. There is that. All right. So away we are. That's the podcast itself. And so if you want to go and listen to that, you can listen to it there on iTunes. I would recommend subscribing to the podcast because I'm going to continue making new things. I mean, there's going to be there'll be new podcasts and new things coming out. Not all of them are going to do with race. That's just what we're talking about now. Okay. So, we're going to have those conversations for a bit and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay. So, coming up this Sunday, of course, I'll be preaching from Acts chapter 17. And this is the story of the Apostle Paul standing on the Areopagus, what is also known as Mars Hill in the Roman version of that. So Areopagus in Athens. And I've had an opportunity to stand on that same spot and to see around, to see what Paul would have seen, of course, 2,000 years ago. And so the Apostle Paul preaches, and there are some people that are influenced by that. And so they're only mentioned like once in the whole Bible, these people. But there's a tradition and there's history around them that I'm going to talk about. So we're going to unpack the story of Dionysus and Damaris. Two people who became Christians, became followers of Jesus because of the influence of Paul. And so we're going to talk about how when you know Jesus, you begin to show Jesus, and then others can know Jesus, right? So that's kind of what we're doing on Sunday. And there'll be all kinds of happiness, I'm sure, as well. Other things, other fun stuff will happen on Sunday. It'll be amazing. All right. So today I have a shirt that is a band, and this one is going to be an easy question, I think, for many of you, if you're children of the 80s, or if you were paying attention over the course of the last umpteen weeks. One of the shirts that I wore was from the movie that I'm about to reference in this particular. But I was I'm getting to the end of my tether, really, when it comes to figuring all this out. I've got like one or two more. I can probably figure out more stuff, but we'll get there. But anyway, I'm wearing my Def Leppard shirt. So this is Def Leppard. So I'm wearing my Def Leppard shirt today. So Def Leppard was one of my favorite bands in the 1980s, and still are. I mean, I love Def Leppard. In fact, I have tickets. They have not yet canceled their show, but I'm sure they will. It was the Motley Crue, Def Leppard. I don't know who all was with them. Poison. I mean, it was going to be like one of the greatest rock concerts that I've seen in like forever. And my son and I were going to go. It was going to be amazing. Stupid coronavirus, man, like screwed all of this up. So at any rate, Def Leppard, I've seen them many, many times, all the way back in the 80s. 1987, I think, was the first time I saw them in concert. And then subsequent years since then, and even taking my son, to see them 2 or 3 times. I think we've seen them 3 times together, he and I have. So anyway, Def Leppard, I love Def Leppard. And they have a song called, it's off of the album Pyromania, that is called Rock of Ages. Rock of Ages. It would have been the greatest hair band concert ever. Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Poison. I think there was one other band that was supposed to be there that was stinking amazing as well. It was going to be ridiculous. Oh, it was Joan Jett. So Joan Jett was going to be playing with them, man. So it was like Joan Jett, Poison. I mean, come on. Like I could have just COVID. I was doing my William Shatner impression from Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, right? Khan. So at any rate, yeah, I was so angry about that, man. All of my concerts have been canceled, and blah. So I was holding out hope that something would happen, but alas. At any rate, so they have a song called "Rock of Ages," and that song has a line in it that is quoted. Okay. That is quoted. Now, I'm just going to ask for the line. Okay. So I'm going to give you the movie. So in the movie Highlander, the song is quoted by one of the characters. What is the line that they quote from the song Rock of Ages? All right. So I'll give you a couple minutes. I don't know who all is on today. We've got 18 people on. And let's see, we've got, I can't tell if I have any viewers. I have 0 viewers on Twitter. Yeah, there we go. So once work started, I think once people started going back to work, man, my viewership has gone down the toity. That's okay. But if you can give me the line. So in the movie Highlander, okay, the character, his name is the Kurgan, who is played by the wonderful actor Clancy Brown. Clancy Brown, who's been in a ton of stuff. I think he was actually in one of my other favorite cult movies, because Highlander is one of my favorite cult movies. And Clancy Brown was also in one of my other favorite cult movies, Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. And he's been in a ton of stuff since. I mean, he's a character actor that's done a lot of things. The movie also starred Christopher Lambert, who really didn't do a whole bunch of stuff after that. I mean, he didn't have a lot of really great movies, but Christopher Lambert was a working actor for a long time. And then, of course, Sean Connery. Sean Connery was in that movie. You mean, yeah, Warren? I don't guess Warren is on today, man. Warren would get it. I think Warren would get it. Yeah. So I thought this was an easy one, man. For those who have seen the movie Highlander. All right. So in the movie Highlander, there's a moment where the Kurgan, which is played by Clancy Brown, and the Highlander, right, the main character, Christopher Lambert's character, they meet in a church because they can't fight in a church, right? These are the immortals, right? The only way that you can kill an immortal is to cut their head off, and it has to be, they have these sword battles and stuff, and it's pretty crazy. And there can be only there's this idea of there can be only one of them at the end of all things, when there's like this sort of quickening that happens, and so anyway, it's a strange story. But at any rate, they meet in this church, and the Kurgan scares the nuns, right? But then he stands up in the middle of the church and he says, "I've got something to say. It's better to burn out than to fade away," right? Which is the line from the song Rock of Ages. A long, convoluted trail to get to that point, right? The Rock of Ages was the first song I'd ever heard from Def Leppard. Of course, they had made other albums before that, before Pyromania, which was their biggest album by far. I think maybe Hysteria was almost as big. But Pyromania, man, was fantastic. There was not a bad song on there. And Rock of Ages was the song that started off "Uten Gotten Diepen Globen," like that, like it was counting in German. So anyway, good old Def Leppard. So if you want to go get nostalgic today, go bust out your dusty copy of Pyromania if you have one, or go on your iTunes and check it out. And then bang your head for a while. Yes, there is. None of y'all are cheating. That's good. That is good. We got movie trivia coming up. I think it's next week, if I'm not mistaken. We have a movie trivia night, and I think the topics are a lot more accessible. Let's just put it that way. So it should be a good time will be had by all. Okay, let me jump in and do the Daily Devo for today. I'm pretty happy about this one. Not that I'm not ever happy about any of them, but some of them, like, I just, something happens and when I write and I'm like, oh man, that was a little bit different than maybe yesterday's. So I called this one "There's a Light," which is the song that I was thinking about when I was coming up with that title. Was the song from Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it was the one of the T-shirts that I wore one day said, "There's a light shining in the darkness of everybody's life," right? And that's a really good line. But there's a light. There's a lamp in my bedroom that has a faintly illuminated on switch that can't be seen in the light of day. But when the room is in darkness, what was a faint light by day creates a glow that bathes an entire wall. I've read that one of the many factors that need to be considered for a good night's sleep is the absence of artificial light like my lamp. Apparently, even if you are asleep, your body knows that there's light shining and won't fully slip into deep rest. This got me thinking about light and darkness and how we perceive both in the world around us. Father Richard Rohr has written extensively about the fact that even when we are peering into what appears to be total darkness, it isn't. You see, all around us in the darkness, there are subatomic particles known as neutrinos that are zipping about. They're byproducts of atomic reactions that are traveling at near light speed. And these neutrinos emit light that we can't perceive with the naked eye, but it is there nonetheless. And at some level, we know this, even if we can't see it. I read this amazing quote from Anthony DeMello the other day, and I had to write it down. He was reflecting on John 1, where the gospel writer wrote about the coming of Jesus, whom he called the Word. So in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, it starts off, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then it goes on to say that there was not anything made in creation that was not made with the Word. And there was, all things were made through the Word, so to speak. So I'm kind of paraphrasing. But the word there is the word logos, which the author of the Gospel of John took a Greek concept of sort of like the cosmos and and kind of like infinity, like the creative, sort of unknown that's out there in the universe. And took that concept, reimagining it, right? Realizing that concept, that idea was not something that was to be avoided. It was something to be embraced. But the unknown quantity of the logos, right, was not unknown. That was the Christ, right? The eternal universal Christ, the Christ that had been with God in the beginning, right? So the idea of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, God the Creator, Christ the Redeemer, the Holy Spirit, the Pneuma, the Sustainer, right? So all of those ideas are being kind of rattled around in the first century with these early gospel writers, right? And so the Gospel of John is written by someone with a great sense of imagination and intellect. And this person comes up with a new concept, a new way of even speaking about Jesus and thinking about Jesus, that Jesus was in the beginning and was with God, right? As the Logos, the Christ, the Messiah, the blueprint, the Word, right? And so that's what the Gospel of John is lifting up, which is just fantastic stuff packed into John chapter 1, reimagining the Genesis chapter 1, really. That's what John chapter 1 is doing. It's a retelling of the story of Genesis with that lens, right? In the beginning, it starts off with in John chapter 1. But there's an amazing part of John 1 where it talks about the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it, right? And so that's where all of this is coming from and where Anthony DeMello was writing. So this passage speaks of the nearness of God to us through the incarnation of the eternal universal Christ in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. According to John's gospel, the Christ, the second person of the Trinity, the Messiah, is the very blueprint that exists within every aspect of creation. And the Apostle Paul picks up on this as well, that Christ is in all, through all, and is all, right? The Apostle Paul, his imagination is also connected to the same way of thinking. The author of John's Gospel states that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome the light. I've always loved that passage, but it takes on new meaning when you read Anthony DeMello's quote, which I'm going to post in the Facebook feed right here. So this is from Anthony DeMello. And if any of you guys want to read Anthony DeMello, I have been pushing Anthony DeMello for a very long time. So look steadily at the darkness. It won't be long before you see the light. Gaze at things. It won't be long before you see the word. In other words, no matter how dark you think it is, there is light shining. No matter how much you think the darkness is winning, the light of Christ is dispelling it, even if you can't perceive it. No matter how far away God might feel in your moments of despair, God in Christ is close. And sometimes it's hard to truly see the things that are closest to you, especially if you feel like you can't see the light. The German poet and philosopher Friedrich Hölderlin once wrote that God is difficult to grasp, not because God is so distant from us human beings, but rather because God is near. So what do we do with this? Well, there's a simple response, but the actual answer is much more challenging to hold on to. Because the simple response is you need to just be willing to look into the darkness. To look steadily into it, which means that we can't be afraid to gaze upon the uncertainty, pain, and emptiness that might surround us. Ignoring it isn't helpful. Running away from it isn't either. Denying it is even worse. We see this happening right now in the highest levels of our government, in churches, and throughout our society. We need to have the courage to face the darkness. It won't be long then before we begin to see signs of light. It can't be kept from us forever if we are willing and patient to wait for it. Christ is there in the darkness, shining the light of love constantly, fervently, eternally. We can take comfort in knowing that the darkness doesn't get to win. It can't overcome the light no matter what we think we see. So may this bring you hope and peace. And may the grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you now and always. Amen. So I hope that was, I always say this, don't I? I hope you liked it. I hope that it was meaningful to you. I wrote it. I was feeling it. You know what I mean? It was like something that, not that I don't feel all the things that I write. I mean, I do. Some of them are more intellectual. Some of them are things that I've processed, things that I want to share. So I feel like well, I've gotten through that, but I want to share my journey. I want to share what I've done and what I've experienced. But sometimes I will write things like this, where it's like I'm going through this, right? This is something that I'm experiencing. I'm seeing this, and I need to do this, and I need to be a part of this. And so, I hope that this was meaningful to you. I hope that this was a Devo that spoke to you as well. If you want to share any of these, please do. Make sure that if you want to share them, just share them on Facebook, the feed itself, the little video, or if you want to share the actual Devos themselves, if you go over to our church Facebook page, to Shepherd of the Hills at SHPC Austin, you will find them there, right? You'll find all of the ones kind of posted there if you scroll through our posts, and then you can share them from there as well if you want to share a particular one. If you don't receive them via email, right? If you don't receive them via email, if you haven't been getting them via email, let me know, right? I can make sure that you get signed up. Just message me on Facebook and give me your email address and your contact information. And I'll make sure that you get added to the email list so that you can get them in print as well. Because a lot of times somebody will say, man, that one really spoke to me. I want to share that with my sister or my friend or my coworker. I have one lady that shares them with a group of like 12 people, and they all talk about them. I have another guy that he goes to another church, like somewhere in Texas, and I know him through a friend, and he got hooked up with our daily devos and his men's group that they gather together and meet on a weekly basis, and now are doing it via Zoom. That's what they use. They pick one devo that I wrote during the week, and they talk about it. I mean, that is humbling, right? But all that happened because people were sharing them. You know, they were sharing them, and so people got hooked into it. So we'd love to be able to share the gloopy gospel of whatever we're doing here, right? With other folks that might need to hear a word of hope and might need to be encouraged. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be shy, and I'll be happy about that. So. Have a great day, guys. I will be headed to my conference here in just a little bit. I got to put the finishing touches on the sermon. I got to work on tomorrow's Daily Devo, which is going to be featuring some awesome wisdom from the author Madeleine L'Anglais, who wrote A Wrinkle in Time, that wonderful book, the children's book. Well, it's not really a children's book. It's a book for anybody, Wrinkle in Time, and a lot of other books as well. She was a Christian author. But really amazing. So I'm going to be focused on some of her work, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Anyway, have a great day, guys. I will see you soon. Be blessed, and don't forget to count it all joy no matter what's going on.